It was almost 2 a.m. I was working deep in the zone when a primal hunger snapped me back to reality. In my small forgotten town, there's only one place to go that late, the 24/7 gas station off the highway, a place I've been to 1,000 times. The store was dead silent. As I roamed the aisles, I saw something that just felt wrong. A man sitting on the cold tile floor, crisscross applesauce like a little kid, and he was just staring at a refrigerator full of soda. My curiosity got the best of me. I tried to walk past to get a subtle glance at his face. But the second I rounded the corner, his head snapped around. His eyes were stretched wide, unblinking, and locked directly onto mine. I thought that was the end of it, a creepy encounter. But as I pulled back onto that dark, empty highway, a pair of headlights appeared in my mirror. It was him. And what started as a weird encounter in a lonely gas station was about to become a fight for my life. There's a certain kind of quiet that only exists in the dead of night, in a place the rest of the world has forgotten. It's not just the absence of sound, it's a presence, a heavy blanket of silence that you can almost feel pressing in on you from all sides. In my small rural town, that's the only kind of night we get. We're the kind of place you pass through on your way to somewhere more important, a handful of houses and a single stoplight blinking yellow into the darkness for no one in particular. It's the perfect setting for all those creepy small town stories you hear about online. And for someone like me, whose brain only truly comes alive when the sun goes down, that silence is both a comfort and a curse. My name isn't important, but what you need to know is that I'm a creature of the night. By trade, I'm a coder, and my most productive hours are nestled between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. In that sweet spot, the world fades away, and it's just me, the glow of my laptop screen, and the intricate dance of code. It's a flow state that's almost addictive, a deep focus where time itself seems to warp and bend. The problem with that kind of intense concentration, though, is that your basic human needs tend to get ignored until they're screaming for attention. And that's exactly what happened last week. It was pushing 2 a.m. I was deep in the zone, my fingers flying across the keyboard. The project I was working on was finally clicking into place, and the satisfaction was a buzz better than any coffee. Then, out of nowhere, it hit me. It wasn't a slow build, a gentle reminder from my stomach. It was a switch flicked. One moment, I was a coding machine. The next, I was consumed by a primal, desperate hunger that made it impossible to think about anything else. My focus shattered. The code on the screen blurred into meaningless symbols. I had to eat. In a city, this wouldn't be a problem, but out here, your options are limited. In fact, there's only one: the Quick Check. It's a gas station and convenience store hybrid right off the highway, a fluorescent oasis in a sea of dark farmland. It's open 24/7, a lonely beacon for truckers and insomniacs like me. For most people, it's a 25-minute drive. But when you're the only car on the road and the night is yours, that time shrinks. To me, it's practically next door. Many people tell stories like a scary night drive horror story or a midnight gas station encounter about these kinds of experiences, and mine was the beginning of just such a terrifying experience. I've made this drive more times than I can count. I know every curve in the road, every pothole to avoid. The journey itself is usually a meditative experience. The highway isn't some grand interstate. It's more of a 2-lane local route that cuts through endless fields. At this hour, it's completely deserted. You start to feel like you're piloting a tiny spaceship, through an endless void with only the narrow beam of your headlights cutting through the oppressive black. On that night, the drive was exactly that, uneventful, quiet, and strangely peaceful. The hum of the engine was the only sound in the universe. Pulling into the Quick Check parking lot felt like re-entering civilization. The harsh, sterile glow of the fluorescent lights spilled out onto the asphalt, a stark contrast to the absolute darkness I'd just driven through. I parked, killed the engine, and the silence rushed back in, now punctuated by the low electric hum of the store's coolers. I like to think I'm a pretty unremarkable guy. Average height, plain clothes, the kind of person you'd see in a crowd and immediately forget. But I'd been here so many times at this ungodly hour that I wouldn't be surprised if the late-night staff had a nickname for me. I walked in, the little bell over the door chiming softly. The air inside was cool and smelled of coffee and cleaning supplies. A tired-looking teenager was behind the counter, scrolling on his phone. He barely glanced up. It was the familiar, comfortable anonymity of a late-night convenience store. I went straight to the deli counter and ordered a sandwich, something simple to silence the beast in my stomach. The kid took my order with a grunt and turned to the slicer. While I waited, the nervous energy that always hums just beneath my surface took over. It's a side effect of the caffeine and a lifetime of ADHD. Staying still has never been my strong suit. So I did what I always do. I roamed the aisles. I wasn't really looking for anything, just pacing, letting my eyes drift over the kaleidoscope of brightly colored bags and boxes. The store was dead silent, save for the hum of the refrigerators and the soft squeak of my sneakers on the linoleum floor. I made my way to the back of the store, past the chips and the candy, and into the aisle with the drinks. On YouTube, stories based on these situations, like the gas station attendant story, are quite popular. But in my story, the main character wasn't me or the attendant. And that's when I saw it. At first, my brain didn't quite process the image. It was so out of place, so bizarre that I just sort of overlooked it. Facing one of the large glass-fronted refrigerators that lined the back wall, there was a person. They weren't standing, browsing the selection of sodas and juices. They were sitting on the cold, tiled floor, crisscross applesauce, like a kid during story time. I kept walking for a few steps, my mind trying to make sense of the snapshot. A worker, taking a break, someone who felt faint. No, that didn't feel right. I stopped at the end of the aisle and risked a glance back. My heart did a little stutter step. I hadn't imagined it. There was, without a doubt, a person sitting on the floor, facing a refrigerator as if it held the secrets of the universe. All I could see from my angle was their back, a worn brown coat, and a pair of faded blue jeans. They were perfectly still, their posture rigid. It was the strangest, most unsettling thing I had ever seen in this store. The peaceful silence of the night was suddenly gone, replaced by a new kind of quiet, one filled with tension and a million unanswered questions. My late-night food run had just taken a very, very weird turn. Many people refer to these kinds of incidents as true scary stories from a small town, and I felt like I had become a living character in just such a story, and scrambled to find a rational explanation. It's the first thing you do when faced with something that doesn't fit into the neat little boxes of everyday life. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he dropped something, a contact lens or a pill, and was looking for it. But the stillness, That was the part that didn't compute. He wasn't searching. He was observing. He was sitting there on the cold floor of a nearly empty convenience store at 2 in the morning, in what looked like a state of deep, unmoving contemplation of a Dr. Pepper display. A cold prickle of unease crawled up the back of my neck. This wasn't just weird, it felt wrong. This was the kind of thing you hear in creepy true stories online. The quiet hum of the refrigerators suddenly seemed louder, more menacing. The brightly lit aisle felt less like a place of commerce and more like a stage for some strange, silent play that I had unwillingly stumbled into. My hunger was still there, a dull ache in my stomach, but it was now overshadowed by a far more powerful instinct, a morbid, consuming curiosity. I had to know what was going on. More than that, I had to see his face. I knew that just walking up to him was out of the question. What would I even say? Hey, man, you good? The Fanta selection really that interesting? No, that would be inviting a confrontation I wanted no part of. I needed a plan, something subtle. My gaze darted around the store. The aisles were laid out in a simple grid. I was at the back in the last aisle. He was one aisle over. If I walked down the parallel aisle, the one with the cookies and crackers, I could get to the front of the store, turn the corner, and walk back up his aisle. The idea was to make it look like I was just continuing my aimless browsing. A quick glance as I rounded the corner. That's all I needed. Many viral videos start just like this, often under titles like 5 creepy true gas station horror stories, and I felt like I was filming my own. I tried to make my movements casual, but my body felt stiff and awkward. Every step seemed to echo in the silence. I was hyper aware of myself, of the sound of my breathing, of the way my jacket rustled. I kept my eyes fixed on the shelves, pretending to be deeply invested in the variety of Oreos available. But my focus was entirely on the corner ahead. My heart was starting to beat a little faster, a low, steady thrum against my ribs. This kind of scenario is the stuff a classic stalker story is made of, and the dread was almost paralyzing. I reached the end of the aisle. This was it. I took a slow breath, trying to calm the jittery energy coursing through me. I told myself to act natural. Just turn the corner, let my eyes flick over for a split second, and then immediately look at the chips on the next shelf. Easy. Inconspicuous. I made the turn, and in that exact synchronized moment, as if he had been tracking my every footstep through the shelves, he whipped his head around and stared directly at me. It wasn't a casual turn. It was a violent, inhumanly fast snap of the neck. One instant he was facing the cooler. The next his eyes were locked on mine. The abruptness of it was so shocking that I physically froze. My carefully constructed plan to be inconspicuous evaporated. My feet felt glued to the floor. My brain short-circuited. I forgot how to pretend to look at snacks. I forgot what I was even doing there. All I could do was stare back. And that face, it will be burned into my memory forever. The man was probably in his late 30s, but his skin was pale and waxy, stretched tight over his cheekbones. But it was his eyes that held me captive. They were stretched so wide I could see the whites all the way around, the irises like 2 perfect, terrified circles. They were unblinking, fixed on me with an intensity that felt like a physical force. His bottom lip was vibrating, a constant, high-frequency tremor that seemed completely disconnected from the rest of his face, almost as if he were freezing cold, except the air in the store was warm and stuffy. His posture was just as bizarre up close. He wasn't sitting in a relaxed way. His body was twisted, his muscles taut and strained, as if holding that seated position required immense effort. But the worst part by far was the expression. There was no anger in it, no curiosity, no recognition. It was a complete and utter void, a blank, dead-eyed stare that looked right through me. It was the kind of look you might see on a mannequin, only this one was breathing. The whole scene felt fundamentally wrong, a glitch in reality. Moments like these are often described as disturbing encounters. The silence between us stretched for what felt like an eternity, thick and suffocating. The only sound was the incessant hum of the coolers and the frantic pounding of my own heart. Finally, after a battle that my brain seemed to be losing, I managed to break the connection. I ripped my eyes away, the movement feeling sluggish and heavy. I turned and practically fled up the nearest aisle, not daring to look back. My casual stroll had turned into a power walk, fueled by pure adrenaline. I needed to get my food and leave. Now. I got back to the front counter, my chest tight with anxiety. The teenage cashier was still engrossed in his phone. My sandwich wasn't ready yet. Of course. I stood there, shifting my weight from one foot to the other, trying to act normal while my mind was screaming. I angled my body so I could see the corner of the store where the man had been. I was half expecting him to emerge from one of the aisles, walking towards me with that same dead-eyed stare. My mind raced with scenarios. What would I do? Would I scream? Run? But he never appeared. Finally, the kid behind the counter slid a wrapped sandwich across the counter with a mumbled, "Here you go." I paid, grabbed my food and headed for the door, my eyes fixed forward. I didn't look back towards the drink aisle. I didn't want to know if he was still there, sitting on the floor, or if he had moved. I just wanted out. The cool night air hit me as I pushed the door open, and I took a deep, shuddering breath. I thought that was the end of it. A strange, creepy encounter to tell my friends about later. But as I was getting in my car and turning the key in the ignition, I saw something move in my peripheral vision. I glanced back towards the store, and I saw him. A figure in a brown coat, running, not jogging, but sprinting at full speed from the store's entrance toward the far, dark end of the parking lot. I was already halfway out of my spot, but there was no mistaking that coat. It was him. As my car swung around to head for the highway, my headlights briefly swept across that side of the lot. For a split second, they illuminated the man yanking open the door of a large, dark-colored pickup truck and jumping inside. A chill, colder than the night air, shot through me. What could a guy like that possibly be in such a hurry to do at 2 a.m.? A dark, ugly thought flickered through my mind, but I pushed it away. It had nothing to do with me. I was just happy to be leaving. I pulled out onto the highway, stomped on the gas, and sped away, wanting nothing more than to put the fluorescent lights of that strange little store and the man inside it far behind me. What began as a weird encounter was escalating into pure late-night horror. The car's engine roared to life, a comforting, familiar sound in the oppressive silence of the night. I pushed the accelerator harder than I needed to, the tires chirping slightly on the pavement as I merged onto the empty highway. My only goal was to put as much distance as possible between myself and that quick check. I kept my eyes locked on the road ahead, trying to force the image of the man with the dead-eyed stare out of my mind. But it was seared onto the inside of my eyelids. The unnervingly wide eyes, the quivering lip, the sheer wrongness of it all. For the first few minutes, I drove on pure adrenaline. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and I realized I was holding my breath. I forced myself to exhale, the air leaving my lungs in a shaky rush. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The bright, clinical glow of the quick check was shrinking behind me, a tiny island of light in an ocean of black. Soon it was nothing more than a faint glimmer, and then it was gone, swallowed by the darkness. Once again, it was just me and the road. The familiar desolation of the highway began to work its magic. The rhythm of the drive, the endless ribbon of asphalt illuminated by my headlights, started to soothe my frayed nerves. The world outside my car was a formless void. I was in my own little bubble, safe and isolated. I'm used to being the only car on the road this late at night. In fact, I prefer it. It's a kind of solitude that feels powerful, like you're the last person on Earth. That's why it was so surprising when I saw them. I'd been driving for maybe 5 or 6 minutes, my speed settling into a comfortable, slightly over the limit cruise. I happened to glance at my rearview mirror out of habit, and my heart skipped a beat. Headlights, 2 small bright dots far in the distance behind me. It was a rare sight on this road at this hour, but not impossible. A trucker maybe, or another night owl like myself. I didn't think much of it at first. Many people share stories titled "Scared on a Lonely Road" about experiences like this, but I couldn't have imagined how terrifying mine would become. But then I checked the mirror again a minute later, and the 2 small dots were noticeably larger. They were closer. That meant whoever was behind me was going faster than I was. And I'll be honest, I wasn't exactly obeying the speed limit myself. My first thought was predictable, a flash of annoyance and anxiety. It was a cop. I was about to get a speeding ticket in the middle of nowhere. Instinctively, I eased my foot off the gas, letting the car slow down to a more respectable speed. I braced myself for the inevitable flash of red and blue lights that would soon fill my car. My night, which had already been strange, was about to get a lot more inconvenient. The headlights kept approaching, growing larger and brighter in my mirror until they were 2 blinding orbs. The vehicle was closing the distance fast. I squinted, trying to make out the shape of the car. It was getting close enough now that I could see its silhouette against the glow of its own lights, and my blood ran cold. It wasn't a police cruiser. It wasn't a sedan or an SUV. It was a truck, a big boxy pickup truck. My peaceful drive was about to turn into a highway horror. And in that gut-wrenching moment of recognition, I knew I've never been more certain of anything in my entire life. It was the same truck from the parking lot. It was him, the man from the quick check. Panic, cold and sharp, stabbed me in the chest. This wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. Why was he following me? What did he want? The questions swirled in my head, but there was no time for answers. My survival instinct took over. I slammed my foot back down on the gas pedal. The engine screamed as the car lurched forward, rapidly climbing back up to speed and beyond. The speedometer needle swept past 80, then 90. The car, a simple sedan, started to feel light and unsteady at this speed. The truck behind me responded instantly, its engine roaring in the darkness. He matched my speed, staying glued to my bumper. Then he started flashing his high beams. Bright, disorienting flashes of light exploded in my rearview mirror, momentarily blinding me. It was aggressive, demanding. Then came the horn, long, blaring blast that echoed across the empty landscape. Videos titled "My Terrifying Highway Encounter" are popular on YouTube for a reason, I was realizing. These real-life horror stories are more common than you'd think. My mind was racing, trying to process the sheer terror of the situation. What were my options? I was in a life or death scenario, and I had seconds to make a decision. Could I outrun him? I was in a smaller, more agile car, but he was in a powerful truck. Pull over? The thought was terrifying. To stop on the side of this desolate highway and just wait for him to get out of his truck. What would happen then? I couldn't bear to imagine it. I chose to run. I pushed the car faster, the needle trembling as it approached 100 miles per hour. The world outside became a terrifying blur of darkness and the white lines of the road. The feeling in my chest was pure, undiluted terror. It's a feeling I can only describe as the certainty of your own approaching death. A primal voice in the back of my head was screaming that I was going to lose control, that the car was going to flip, that I was going to die right here on this empty stretch of asphalt. In a desperate gamble, I swerved into the right lane, hoping he would take the opportunity to fly past me in the left lane and just disappear into the night. But he didn't. He mirrored my move instantly, swerving right behind me, never leaving that terrifying position just inches from my bumper. He was toying with me. The realization hit me that I couldn't outrun him, and I couldn't keep driving at this speed forever. My car wasn't built for it. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely keep a grip on the steering wheel. Slowing down seemed like my only option. With a heart full of dread, I began to ease my foot off the accelerator, planning to pull over onto the shoulder of the road and face whatever was coming. But the moment my car started to decelerate, the truck rammed into me. The impact was a deafening crunch of metal on metal. My car jolted violently and I was thrown forward against my seatbelt. I screamed, grabbing the steering wheel with all my strength to keep the car from spinning out. The terror I had felt before was nothing compared to this. This was no longer a threat, it was an attack. This was a real-life scary car chase. He wasn't trying to scare me, he wasn't trying to get my attention. He was trying to kill me. Everything happened in a chaotic, terrifying blur. The world outside my windows tilted and swayed as I fought to regain control of the car. The sound of the impact was still ringing in my ears, a brutal metallic shriek that seemed to tear through the fabric of the night. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, so loud I could feel it in my throat. For a split second I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. My entire universe had been reduced to the vibrating steering wheel in my hands and the horrifying realization that the man behind me was actively trying to murder me on this dark, deserted highway. This was no longer just a story. It was a terrifying true story happening to me. My mind, which had been paralyzed by fear, suddenly kicked into a different gear. It was no longer about outrunning him or trying to understand his motives. It was about survival, pure and simple. This was the definition of a survival horror situation. Everything was happening so fast, there was no room for complex thought, only instinct. I knew with a chilling certainty that he was going to hit me again. He had felt the impact, felt my car shudder, and he would do it again, harder this time. At the speed we were going, another direct hit, especially to the rear quarter of the car, would send me spinning out of control. And on this empty road, spinning out at nearly 100 miles per hour meant only one thing. I glanced frantically in my rearview mirror. The truck's headlights were like the eyes of some monstrous predatory beast, filling my entire field of vision. They were impossibly close. I could see the dark, imposing grille of the truck, a wall of steel intent on my destruction. I knew I had maybe a second or two before he made his next move. The terror was still there, a cold, suffocating blanket, but something else was rising through it, a desperate, primal instinct to live. I don't know where the idea came from. Maybe it was a scene from a movie I'd long forgotten, or maybe it was just my brain flooded with adrenaline, firing off the only insane, counterintuitive strategy it could conjure. This was a moment straight out of a video titled, "I was chased by a psychopath." As I saw the front of his truck begin to lurch forward again, in my mirror, signaling his second ramming attempt, I acted. I didn't try to speed up. I didn't try to swerve away. I yanked the steering wheel hard to the left, and at the same exact moment, I slammed on the brakes with every ounce of strength I had. The screech of my tires was a sound of pure agony, a high-pitched scream of rubber against asphalt that drowned out even the roar of the engines. My car fishtailed violently, the back end swinging out as it decelerated with brutal force. The seatbelt cut deep into my shoulder and chest, the only thing keeping me from being thrown through the windshield. For a horrifying moment, I thought I had made a fatal mistake, that I was about to spin out and flip right in front of him. But my desperate maneuver had done exactly what I had subconsciously hoped it would. It had changed the equation. He had been accelerating, anticipating hitting a target that was moving forward. When my car suddenly slowed and swerved, he had no time to react. The massive pickup truck shot past me on the right. I watched, my breath caught in my chest as he flew by. I saw the dark silhouette of the driver through the passenger side window, a faceless shape in the chaos. He was fighting his own battle now. He yanked his steering wheel to correct his course, trying to avoid me and stay on the road. The truck swerved violently back and forth across both lanes of the highway. Its tires screamed in protest as he overcorrected, the massive vehicle lurching from one side to the other like a wounded animal. Then it happened. The back end of the truck swung out too far. He lost control. I watched in a state of surreal disbelief as the truck spun a full 180 degrees, its headlights momentarily sweeping across my car and blinding me. It slid backward for a moment before the tires caught the gravel on the shoulder of the highway. The truck dug in, tilted precariously, and then shot off the road, crashing through a wire fence and plowing into the dark, empty field that bordered the highway. It bounced violently over the uneven terrain before finally coming to a stop in a cloud of dust and debris, its headlights now pointing uselessly up at the starless sky. This was a real-life horror story unfolding before my very eyes. Silence. The sudden absence of noise was almost as shocking as the violence that preceded it. The roaring engines, the screeching tires, it was all gone. My car was idling in the middle of the highway, the engine making a low, trembling sound that seemed to match the shaking of my own body. My hands were clamped onto the steering wheel, my grip so tight my fingers ached. I couldn't move. I just stared at the disabled truck in the field, its headlights like two eerie beacons in the darkness. My mind struggled to catch up with what had just happened. I had survived. Somehow I had survived. A part of me wanted to stay there, to wait and see if he was getting out, if he was hurt. But a much louder, more rational part of my brain was screaming at me to go, get away. Now, he could have a weapon. He could be getting out of that truck right now, ready to finish what he started. Despite how violently my hands were shaking, despite the terror that was still making my vision swim, I forced myself to move. I took my foot off the brake, put the car in drive, and pressed the accelerator. The car moved forward slowly at first, then faster. I didn't look back at the truck in the field. I fixed my eyes on the road ahead and drove. The rest of the way home was a blur. I sped the entire way, my eyes constantly darting to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see another pair of headlights appear out of the darkness. But the road remained empty. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the familiar sight of my own house felt alien, like a place from a different lifetime. I stumbled out of the car, my legs feeling weak and unsteady. As soon as I got inside, I locked the door, leaned against it and slid down to the floor, my body finally succumbing to the waves of shock and adrenaline. My breath came in ragged, painful gasps. I was safe. I was alive. After a few minutes of just trying to breathe, I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911. My voice was trembling as I tried to explain what had happened, the words tumbling out in a jumbled, incoherent stream. The chase, the ramming, the truck in the field. It was a creepy encounter that sounded insane even as I said it. It was difficult to give them a precise location. It all happened so fast, on a dark, featureless stretch of highway. But they took my statement, promised to send a patrol car to check the area, and told me to stay inside and keep my doors locked. I hung up the phone and just sat there in the silence of my own home, the events of the night playing over and over in my head like a nightmare you can't wake up from. The hours that followed the phone call were some of the longest of my life. I didn't sleep. I couldn't even think about it. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see were those blinding headlights in my mirror and the terrifying, violent motion of the truck spinning off into the darkness. I paced my living room like a caged animal, jumping at every tiny sound from outside, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the distant bark of a dog. Each noise sent a fresh jolt of fear through me, the irrational terror that he was somehow out there, that he had gotten out of that wrecked truck and was coming for me. This wasn't just a story anymore. It was my own personal nightmare fuel. The sun started to rise a few hours later, painting the sky in pale shades of pink and orange. The arrival of daylight should have been a comfort, a sign that the horrors of the night were over. But it didn't feel that way. The world outside my window looked the same, but for me, it had fundamentally changed. The familiar, peaceful silence of my rural life now felt menacing, filled with unseen threats. The empty roads I used to love now seemed like a trap. It was like one of those eerie small-town tales had come to life. Later that morning, I went outside to inspect my car in the daylight. The damage was sickeningly real. There was a large, ugly dent in the rear bumper with deep scrapes and a smear of dark paint from his truck. It was a tangible, physical reminder that what had happened wasn't just a nightmare. It was real. Someone had tried to run me off the road. Someone had tried to hurt me, or worse. Looking at that dent, I felt a fresh wave of nausea and the kind of lingering fear that doesn't just go away. It's been a week since that night. The police called me back the next day. They had found the truck. It was abandoned in the field, exactly where I said it would be. The front end was heavily damaged from the crash, but the cab was empty. There was no sign of the driver or any passengers. They ran the plates. The truck had been reported stolen 2 days earlier from a town over 100 miles away. There was no wallet, no ID, no clue as to who had been behind the wheel. The case, they told me, was still open, but without any witnesses or a clear suspect, it had become an unexplained mystery. They asked me about the quick check. I told them everything about the man on the floor, the strange behavior, the dead-eyed stare. I know for a fact that the store has security, cameras, both inside and in the parking lot. I'm holding on to the hope that the police will get that footage, that they'll be able to get a clear image of his face, and that maybe, just maybe, they'll catch him. But a part of me is terrified of what happens if they do. Would I have to testify? Would I have to see that face again? My car is still sitting in the driveway, the dent a constant glaring reminder. I need to get it repaired, but I haven't been able to bring myself to do it yet. It feels like erasing the evidence, even though I know that's not rational. My sleep schedule, which was already a mess, is now completely shattered. I find myself wide awake at 2 a.m., not with the creative energy of a coder in the zone, but with the heart-pounding anxiety of a prey animal that has narrowly escaped a predator. The story of my life could now have a title. I'm a coder, and I almost got killed on a midnight drive. The question that haunts me, the one that circles my mind in an endless, terrifying loop is, why? Why me? Was it random? Did I just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or was it something I did? Was it the way I looked at him in the store? Did my fearful, curious stare somehow trigger something in his unstable mind? Did he see me as a threat or a challenge? I've replayed our brief silent interaction in that aisle 1,000 times. I tried to see it from his perspective, to understand what could possibly lead from a shared, uncomfortable glance to a high-speed, murderous chase on a dark highway. But there's no logic to be found. It's like trying to understand the motivations of a hurricane. There is no why. There is only the destructive, terrifying what. This is a true horror story with no resolution. I haven't been back to the quick check. I don't think I'll ever be able to go there again, especially not at night. The thought of those fluorescent lights, that silent, sterile store now, fills me with a deep, visceral dread. My late-night hunger pangs are now silenced with whatever I can find in my own kitchen. The 25-minute drive that used to feel like nothing now seems like an impossibly long and dangerous journey. My life has been divided into a before and an after. Before, the darkness was my friend and quiet companion to my most focused work. Now, the silence is the loudest sound, filled with echoes, the echo of screaming tires, of crunching metal, and of a question I know I'll never be able to answer. As for why that man went after me, your guess is as good as mine. All I know is that I saw something I wasn't supposed to see in his eyes that night, a void, and for a few terrifying minutes on a lonely stretch of highway, I felt that void trying to pull me in. I just hope I never ever see him again.